We're traveling to increasingly bleak and devastated worlds, but also worlds that are essentially the land of ooh if just one thing was different. In episode 7, it's a world where Marcy was never protected by Simon. In episode 8, it's a world where the Lich destroyed all life in that entire plane of existence. We left episode 6 with our heroes lost, and in episode 7 they start off no better. Simon is still convinced the crown will solve all their problems, while Fionna is still turning over the events of the Winter King mess in her mind.
We could all sit here and think, which is in a lot of ways the most terrifying thing one can do.
At the opening of episode 7, newly emerged in another post-apocalyptic wasteland, Simon notes they've only got one jump left with the remote, so they really need to get the crown this time. Cake thinks Fiona's still in shock over Winter King being stone cold nasty in Cake's words, not realizing that Fiona's self-image has been shattered. Her view of her own heroic nature is in pieces, and she's obviously feeling a lot of that negative emotion that was smothering her in episode 1. As she puts it, I want to make things better, not worse. Cake argues it was in self-defense. Obviously, in episode 6, Fionna was trying to defend Simon. I liked the way episodes 7 and 8 leaned into the theme of personal crisis. The trio almost gets taken out by a team of vampires only to be rescued by another alternate Bonnie. A grizzled paramilitary in pink camouflage gear. Everything around you is dead and grey, PB. What are you doing? With her team of Tank, Huntress and Martin Mertens, Bonnie plans to destroy the Vampire King and his right hand, the Star. Bonnie is essentially a foil for Fionna in this episode. While Bonnie is calculating and ruthless, Fionna impulsively tries to help some stranded travelers, only to realize it's a trap. Martin, who is not a remorseless psychopath in this reality, dies heroically fighting the vampire known as the Star, aka Marcy. As for Scarab, he's still out to destroy Prismo's fanfic, such a hater.
A little erotic fan fiction never hurt anybody.
After arguing briefly with Prismo, he realizes he can get to Fionna, Cake and Simon a simpler way, only to be abruptly summoned to his boss's office. Speaking of Simon, his mind, focused on vampires, has subtly transformed Fiona's world. I don't remember this part of town being so gothic, Gary says to Marshall, although he seems to be the only one to notice the change. In the side plot, Marshall takes Gary to meet his mother's elite friends, basically a networking opportunity. Gary loses patience when he sees Marshall's mum mocking Marshall in front of her friends. I have a theory about what this tells us about Gary's role in the finale, so I'll split that off into a separate video and you can check that out if you're interested. After Bonnie's done blaming Fionna for getting Martin killed and getting her tank wrecked, Bonnie hatches a plan to finish off the vampires once and for all. But when the plan fails, Huntress is killed, and Marcy ends up locked in a fight with Bonnie. Apparently Marcy doesn't want to kill Bonnie, despite enjoying killing everyone else, and Bonnie says it would be so easy to stake Marcy but doesn't, even though Marcy keeps killing off her team. How did they manage to develop this weird relationship? Have they been flirting on and off while trying to kill each other for the past 1,000 years or so? That's a bit too edgy for me. The episode cuts from Marcy and Bonnie fighting to Cake and Fionna fighting. Cake sees a chance to attack the Vampire King, but Fionna thinks he's too powerful and tries to stop her. In the fight, the remote breaks, but Fionna does manage to zap them into the next universe before the Vampire King can get Cake. Thus far, we've seen Fionna has been seeking a life of action and purpose, and in episode 6, she proved herself fully capable of prevailing in battle. Episode 7 shows us the aftermath. In the hero's journey story structure, the reward stage covers the experience of emerging victorious after facing death. In his book The Writer's Journey, Christopher Vogler gets us to imagine the hero's experience. You're different, you've changed. Part of you has died and something new has been born. You and the world will never be the same. This is part of the reward for facing death. Unfortunately for Fionna, her reward has included an existential crisis. Also, an error heroes can make at this stage is to underestimate the significance of the ordeal they've been through. As Vogler puts it, someone hit by the hammer of change may deny that anything happened. In my last review, I thought Simon was at a different stage of the hero's journey, but now I think it's more that he's just reacting in very different ways to Fionna. Episodes 7 and 8 are the most interconnected of any episodes thus far, and personally I felt like I was watching one long episode with these two. Regardless, there was a clear distinction, with episode 7 focused on evil Marcy's world, and episode 8 on a world where the Lich destroyed all life. Similarly, episode 7 focuses on the reward stage of the hero's journey, and episode 8 covers the next stage, known as the road back. In my opinion, the strong use of narrative structure made Fiona's development in these episodes all the more compelling. The road back mirrors the crossing the first threshold stage of the hero's journey in the sense that it is a turning point, often where the goals, stakes, and risks change for the heroes. In the story stage, the road back, the hero resolves to return to the ordinary world, and bring back with them the knowledge gained in the special world or worlds. Sometimes there's an unexpected setback or a villain previously thwarted re-emerges and wreaks havoc. In episode 8, this time they enter a world that has a wasteland to outdo all wastelands. Cake is angry at Fionna for pulling her away from the Vampire King. As Fionna puts it, however, "It's my fault you're not dead." As for Scarab, he's in his boss's waiting office. Apparently there's quite a complex celestial bureaucracy and the whole thing is a mess. Apart from his great accent, Scarab's boss is unimpressive. He doesn't seem to have a clue what he's doing. While Scrabby is considering going above his boss to the bigger boss, Simon is trying to cheer up the gloomy Fionna, telling her she did the right thing. Fionna in turn tries to point out the good Simon did protecting his version of Marcy, but it doesn't get through to Simon, who feels he should have done better. There's some interesting dissonance here. Simon admits he feels like he failed Marcy by giving in to the lure of the crown, but his plan for now is still to get the crown again. Maybe some of you will see other parallels here, but personally, this reminds me of the negative thought spiral that can occur with depression, that is, an experience during depression in which the mind fixates on negative ideas and actively filters out the positive. Anyway, Simon jokes with Fionna a bit, then seeing she's interested, tells her how his romance with Betty started. Incidentally, it started oddly similarly to how the sci-fi franchise Stargate started, with a passionate professor lecturing on his theories about ancient artifacts, only to be laughed at and mocked. But the one person who believes him changes his life forever. In this case, Betty expresses her admiration of Simon's ideas, and they end up going on an expedition and finding the Enchiridion. In the present, the trio meet Bimo, who tries to help them fix their remote. Fionna and Cake stumble across the tapes of the alternate Ice King of the Wasteland world, and Fionna and Cake finally see what Simon getting the crown actually means. Bimo keeps insisting there are other people in this reality, but it's increasingly obvious it's a coping mechanism. When Cake confronts Fionna about ruining everything, Simon cheers her up with the end of his romantic story, which also inspires Bimo to sacrifice himself to fix their remote. Unfortunately, his sacrifice fails to fix anything. After he dies, Bimo glitches, turning into the alarm clock from Fiona's world. It's not the first time objects around Fionna and Cake have changed form. Presumably this will be resolved in the finale. It's certainly not explained in this episode, but I'd say the fact it keeps happening indicates the unraveling of the multiverse that Scarab's so afraid of is a real possibility. Speaking of the Scarab, he manages to win over his boss's boss and is dispatched to deal with Simon, Fionna, and Cake. He arrives just after Fionna, Simon, and Cake have found the Lich, and Fionna has revealed she had the crown since the Winter King incident. Incidentally, so many people are depressed in this show, even the Lich. Talk about staying on theme. Ultimately, the Scarab is too late. Simon successfully casts his spell to send back Fionna and Cake, and as he's about to put on the crown, the Scarab attacks, only for a chasm to open up, sucking the Scarab away. We see glowing lights resembling Golb's face appear in the Lich's eye, and it ends on a cliffhanger. Betty's last wish in the Adventure Time finale was to protect Simon. It may be that wish is strong enough to protect him, not just from the Scarab, but from the crown ever affecting him again. Before we finish up, let's talk about the great character development Fiona's getting lately. The fact that the show has leaned so hard into Fiona's unlikable traits and mistakes creates plenty of room for character growth and development. Unlikable is obviously subjective, but episode 7 emphasizes that Fionna now feels guilty for not thinking about how her actions affect others, leading her to thoughtlessly hurt other people. But the most brutal scene comes in episode 8. When Bimo admits he has no idea how to fix the remote, Cake abruptly blames Fionna for the whole mess, leading Fionna to run away in tears. One thing that stuck out to me about this scene was how such a simple piece of drama was so powerful. Part of this is the heartfelt performance of Madeleine Martin as Fionna, but equally important is where the scene fits in structurally. Episode 7 opens with Fiona's personal crisis and her feelings of guilt. It progresses to her making a mistake, after which Martin dies, and ends with her trying to save Cake's life. Episode 8 opens with Cake angry about Fiona's actions. So, over these 2 episodes, we see a lot of pressure piling up on Fionna. Her mistake with Martin is all the more difficult because she wasn't being selfish in that situation, but she got punished for it regardless. But it goes deeper. Episode 1 established an underlying sense of unhappiness that was part of Fiona's mindset. She was able to push this away when she was exploring new worlds like a hero in a video game. Now that the reality has set in, that unhappiness has descended back down on her like a ton of bricks. So Cake's comment was the last straw, leading Fionna to break down. What I'm getting at here is how artfully this was written to maximize the emotional impact of this scene. And last point on this topic, but Fiona's decision to hide the crown is yet another sign of her evolving and growing. Once she saw a glimpse of the crown's danger, she didn't impulsively start a fight with Simon. She hid the crown and gave herself time to think, and her friends time to find another way to deal with the situation. Sure, it was deceptive, but did she have a better option here? Let's not forget, these 2 episodes have generic vampires and Adventure Time's most generic bad guy, the Lich, as key villains, and yet these are possibly the best episodes thus far. For me, what makes these episodes so strong is Fiona's character development, and I say this as someone who was never her biggest fan. That wraps up my thoughts on episodes 7 and 8. If you enjoyed the video, you can help the channel by liking and subscribing. Thank you to those of you who have subscribed already. Have a great week and thank you for watching.